Hello everyone and welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're doing good and well. So I'm back briefly from my hiatus for at least 2 or 3 videos, just as I've got a slightly quieter period during my move. As you can see, I'm still in my flat with the usual background behind me, but that may not be for too much longer. Everything at the moment is subject to contract, so it's still in a little bit of an uncertain period for me, but I thought I'd take this time where I'm in a slightly quieter period just for a short time to post up a couple of videos, and the first, or one of these videos, is going to be a ranking or a re-ranking of the Alien franchise films, because I have done a ranking of these films on the channel before, probably about 3 years ago. My, how time flies. Of course, with the recent release of Alien Romulus, I couldn't resist revisiting all of these films and ranking them from my least favourite to my favourite, as I always do. And I always say, don't treat these rankings too seriously if you can avoid it, because these are always personal. All these lists on the internet, they're always personal. They're always going to have the slant, the angle of the person that is doing the ranking, of course, because we all have our different tastes with all of these things. Big fan of the Alien franchise here, and have been actually since the very young age of 9 years old. Now, I shouldn't have been watching any of these films at that young age, but I was introduced by a friend to the action scenes in Aliens, and from there on in, absolutely loved this franchise. It did actually scare me a little bit as well, I'll be honest, but I loved the films from the word go. I thought they were, all the ones I saw, I really enjoyed, but I don't want to give too much away at this point, because we're going to crack on now with my ranking of all of these films from my least favourite to my favourite. And of course, spoiler warning here, because some of these, I'm sure I'll mention the odd scene or character and what happens to them. I think if you're coming here, you probably have seen the film, so the spoiler warning may not matter too much to you, but I'm going to put it out there anyway, just in case you might not have seen all of them. So let's start with my least favourite film, which is AVP2 Requiem, and that's perhaps predictable. Easily for me, the sort of true stinker of this whole list of films, really. I just think it's kind of a bit schlocky. There's not much depth to any of the characters here, really. It sort of just plays as a kind of like a bit of a B movie. I mean, actually, you know what? There is some element. I can watch this and be a little bit entertained. There are some cool kills in this film. So if you're a horror fan, or a sort of a fan of cheap thrills kind of horror, you might actually like some of this film. I think it does have that to offer, but very little else. The story's weak, the characters are weak, the action's even often difficult to see because the movie's so dark, poor lighting. Everyone's always talked about these things with AVP2, and I feel the same way about it. I think it's easily the worst in the franchise. Every film after this has a bit more of something going for it. I think, most of the films in this franchise are at least respectable, apart from AVP2 Requiem, which is a genuine bit of a stinker in the pack. Coming in at number 8, we've got Alien Covenant from 2017. The follow-up to Prometheus, which came out a few years before. I'll be talking about that one fairly soon as well. But, Covenant, I think I could understand why people might have this higher than me. I do think it definitely has things going for it. For me, it's a bit of a film of two halves, and it struggles to be any one thing, this movie. I think it sometimes tries to call back to the earlier movies, sometimes just tries to be its follow-up to the follow-up to Prometheus, and doesn't really fail on any of its, or doesn't really pass, or really succeed, on any of its objectives. But, for me, I really enjoy the film up to a certain point. I love all the scenes, the chaotic scenes in the marshes, when you've got shit blowing up, and you've got awful things happening left, right and centre, people getting infected left, right and centre. I really love those sequences. But halfway through the film, it grinds to a halt, and we suddenly try and tie the film back to Prometheus more, and you get reintroduced, of course, to David, and you kind of just have this sort of weird mid part of the film, and everyone kind of always is I find speaks about the David and Ward's characters in a very positive light, and I like them as well. But it's not any sort of slight against that, really, but it's just the film kind of really just slows right down for me, and I don't like that. I think the film had a lot of momentum with its action scenes, with all the stuff going on, and I liked the chaos of this film. I didn't want it to calm down so much and to slow right down for the second half. Yeah, some good action scenes again towards the end, but for me they felt way too similar to what we'd had before already in these films. But you know what? It's not bad. It's definitely a lot better than AVP2 Requiem. Anyway, number 7 for me is Aliens vs Predator. A fun film for me, a guilty pleasure. I won't talk too much about this. I think I've talked about it before on the channel at least a couple of times. Enjoy the final girl played by Sana Lathan. I think she's good. I think the film does pit the aliens against the predators very well, and you get the best of what both of those creatures have to offer in this film. You get some pretty good facehugger action as well, some good elements of a labyrinthine labyrinthine sequences with our characters trying to find ways out of there, getting themselves into deeper and deeper trouble. And I like all of that and the way it's kind of wrapped up in this movie, and the sort of the different, the different acts and scenes. But it's not great, it's not award-winning, but it's just a fun guilty pleasure, and it comes in here at number 7. Coming in at number 6, we've got Prometheus, a very divisive film for the fan base. I think you've got some people that love this film, some people that hate it. I'm probably not either of those, really. I don't hate it. It's certainly not one of my favourite from this franchise, but it does have some depth to it. I do appreciate what it was trying to do, and I thought it could have maybe achieved that. How I would have made some different choices for me personally with how this film was kind of delivered and executed, but it had something going for it. I think it had an element of imagination, and I actually enjoyed some of the elements that were callbacks to the earlier films, particularly Alien in this movie. And I liked Elizabeth Shaw as a character too, when she gives herself that C-section. I think that's the best scene in this film for me personally. I think it's awesome, and that's the bit of the film where you're absolutely on the edge of your seat. Brilliant stuff for me in Alien Prometheus there. But for me, the rest of the film is a little bit slow burn, a little bit too obsessed with its own ideas, and never really takes off or really engages its audience in the ways it could have done for me. So I kind of like some of the ideas, but the execution's not great. So Prometheus here comes in at number 6 in my list. Coming in at number 5, we got the much maligned Alien 3, directed by David Fincher. And, to some extent, I understand the criticism of this film. The way it starts is a real killer of, off the back of such a fantastic film, Aliens, and the characters in that. The start of this film is a real disappointment, particularly if you love those characters. But by the same token, I think this film actually brings something fresh, and it feels distinctive. It doesn't feel like it is a repeat of either of the first 2 films, and I still think it achieves what it was trying to. I like the idea of these prisoners in this minimalist kind of setting, and having to find ways to deal with a formidable foe with very little in the way of ability to combat these aliens, and nothing really much on offer for them. I like a lot of the cast members in this film as well, and some really great scenes with those characters too. And I really love the score of this film. I think it's really great. I think, do you remember the name of the guy that scored this film? Let me see if I can remember quick. Elliot Goldenthal. I think that he really does do a fantastic score here. And that's one of the reasons, actually, that it might be that this is higher up in my list. I'm a person that loves soundtracks. And some people laugh at me sometimes when I say, I love the soundtrack, but it often has an impact on me and how much I love film. So that, I think, is a factor in why Alien 3 is also a bit higher up for me in my list, because I think it's genuinely really, really good. Now, next up at number 4, we've got Alien Romulus, the newest film, and it comes in pretty high here. I have a lot I like about this film. There were some things that slightly I was like, oh yeah, okay, I know what they're doing here, but it maybe wasn't necessary, because this film had so much going for it that I thought the moments where they went for the callback service line, fan service lines, they're just not really necessary, because the film had me. It had me in those moments. I didn't need the lines. I didn't really, for me personally, I wasn't sure about bringing back Ian Holm for the, and all of that kind of stuff for this character called Rook. I wasn't totally sure about that, but I still felt that this was a real good, good return to form for this franchise. Going back somewhat to basics, but also bringing in a few newer elements with a young cast, and a little bit of a fresher story, somewhat, and. For me, though, the thing that made this film, and I thought the stars of this film were actually the facehuggers. Fede Alvarez, he seems to know how to do great facehugger sequences, because for me, the standout moments in this film were all the scenes with the facehuggers in. They were just phenomenal. And when I was watching those scenes, I had chills. I thought, this is like Alien. This is like Aliens again. These scenes are superb. I could just have face hugger moments throughout this film. Just give me a film with Fede Alvarez, you know, kind of giving us lots of face hugger scenes, and I'd probably be happy with that because they're so good in this movie. Love the monster scene towards the end as well, the sort of human monster thing. Some parts of the sort of final act I wasn't as keen on. It kind of goes a bit too over the top with some of this sort of the effects and some of the moments, as I say, the callback lines were a little bit on the excessive side for my taste anyway. But this is a film you'll probably really enjoy if you like the older films. I think it does well, even as, you know, as a fan service type film. I think it's a good one. It's a really good one. And, you know, I like this probably more than the previous 5 films on my list. And it's why it's come up pretty high at number 4. Now, at number 3, we go to the most controversial, easily for me, the most controversial placement in this list. At number 3, yep, you got it. It's Alien Resurrection. Alien Resurrection. Now, let's put some context to this, because I do feel like this was one of the films I saw when I was a lot younger, growing up, and I still kind of have a bit of a teenage boy type love and nostalgia in me for this movie. I love the action scenes. There is a segment here, right, in this film that I think is one of the best, even, you know, goes toe to toe with some of those Alien sequences, the action scenes in those films. That is the underwater sequence that goes into the moment where they climb up the ladder, and, you know, you have the eggs in the chamber with the face huggers as well. And all of that is just top-notch Alien franchise moments in there. Absolutely brilliant. And I love the cast of characters in this film. I love Ron Perlman's performance here. I just think, you know, Sigourney Weaver's kind of interesting as that sort of, you know, as sort of returning as a kind of clone character that she is in this film, part alien, part her. And I think that's kind of interesting as an idea. And I do think that makes for some scenes which make you think in different ways about her, you know, and open up the franchise a little bit. You know, a lot of people hate that idea of the resurrection after what happens to her in Alien 3. I mean, a lot of this franchise has moments which are really, really far-fetched. I mean, it's sci-fi horror, right? But I do really enjoy so much this film. I just think it's so entertaining. And I can't claim, you know, like I said at the start, some of these choices are not film critic choices. This one is probably the standout as my most controversial choice, based more on what I get out of the film. I get it. I'm not so keen on the last act. I know many people criticise the last scenes in this film, and I'm kind of the same. I'm sort of with that. I do think it was, again, not really necessary. But this film for me has enough to offer, and I think it's just, you know, a great fun ride, and I can watch this any time of day. Give me this any day over Prometheus. Give me this any day over, you know, Covenant and the AVP films. I love Resurrection. It's just my honest view, or my honest kind of, feeling, rather. Next up are the predictable choices, I guess, the ones you knew were coming, and the ones you probably knew were going to be top of my list, and undoubtedly, you know, there is no question what these are going to be. Number 2 for me is Aliens, the James Cameron, just 1986, you know, this expanded on. A lot of people refer to this as the action film, but, you know, if you watch this one again, you notice that actually there's quite a lot of build-up before you get all the action sequences, and it's building up all the characters, you know, the sort of the military cast in this movie, the soldier, you know, the Marines, and it's building up their character profiles. If you watch carefully, rather than going straight into many action sequences, there's a lot of build-up of their characters. So when you get all the action moments that come later on in the film, they hit harder because those characters' profiles have been built up really well. You know, your Apones, your Hudsons, your Vasquez. I love Vasquez in this film. I think she's just fantastic. Everyone talks about Ripley and, you know, her being a sort of feminist icon, all this kind of stuff. What about Vasquez? She is absolutely kick-ass in this movie. I love her character. And Hudson as well, played by the late Bill Paxton. It's just, oh man, it's so good. Aliens is so good. Don't need to say much more about it than probably what's been said by many people already. It's a sort of action horror, sci-fi action horror classic. It's iconic by now, I think. And of course, the other iconic film in this franchise is the classic from 1979, the Ridley Scott directed original Alien, has the sort of really claustrophobic haunted house vibe, but this film has aged so well for me, like a fine wine. Yes, there are one or two moments that are dated a little bit, but you know, this film for me is still as terrifying as it was in 1979. Maybe not, you know, if you saw the film in 1979 for the first time, you're one of those lucky people, then I'm sure that was absolutely terrifying when you don't know what's coming as well, with particularly with the John Hurt scene, right? But this is a masterclass, this film, in horror, in sort of developing suspense and tension and dread, and gore and practical effects, you know, which some of the best you probably see from that sort of era, as well for me. And the performances of pretty much all the cast in this film, I think you got the likes, I mean, of Sigourney Weaver, of course, and Ian Holm and John Hurt and Veronica Cartwright. The cast are just absolutely phenomenal, and that's another reason why this film is so great, because the performances are just off the scale. They are absolutely tremendous. So yeah, Alien is my favourite film of all time. I mean, it is the sci-fi horror classic, perhaps the all-time best sci-fi horror classic, maybe with The Thing in contention for that, but for me it's Alien. This is just breathtaking sci-fi horror at its very best. So thanks everyone for watching this slight return from my hiatus and this video. And until next time, don't forget to drop a like and a sub. Hopefully I will be back on the channel before too long now. But yeah, hopefully I will see you next time, whenever that is. Until next time, bye for now.